Welcome to the Chapel Thrill Podcast with Hunter Caparelli and JJ Jones.
What's going on, Tar Heel Nation? Welcome to it's now 15th edition of the Chapel Thrill Pod, your home for all things Carolina basketball. I'm Hunter Caparelli, sideline reporter, studio host, analyst for ACC Network Extra, and joining me is my co-host, former UNC football wide receiver, JJ Jones. JJ, it's definitely been a minute since we've had and been on the pod. How are we doing?
Doing good, man. You know, been making moves in life, and UNC's making some moves in basketball as well. So it's really a good time to be a UNC basketball fan. Very curious of what this team brings, as all fans are right now. But again, it's almost that time. I know they just ended the basketball season, but I'm itching to get back into this college basketball.
You're definitely spot on. They have been making a lot of moves since we aired our last episode a couple weeks ago. Coach Michael Malone, he's been actively traveling overseas across the country, trying to recruit, especially some big man depth, as well as even recruit from the high school ranks to round out next year's roster, which after last week's NBA draft withdrawal deadline, next season's team is essentially set. So me and JJ will give our thoughts, opinions on how the roster is currently constructed for next season, and we'll get into expectations on what next year should look like. So let's get into it. JJ, since our last episode, when the portal spring window officially closed, the NBA draft early entry deadline had passed. We had learned the news that all ACC big man Henry Vassar would stay in the NBA draft. I don't think that was too much of a surprise from there. Vassar would have been in the preseason All-American conversation if he had returned to college after averaging 17-9 last season, but he'll likely end up being a late first-round pick later in the draft next month. His departure, though, did definitely leave a sizable hole at the center position. And Mike Malone, he was definitely working actively in the transfer portal, trying to figure out how to fill that hole. And a lot of news was coming out that he was looking overseas, specifically in Spain. Rumors were circling that he was in Barcelona recruiting two different FC Barcelona program players, the first of which was a 5-star, 7-foot center, Joaquim Boumiche. He ends up transferring to Duke. So John Shire gets the up on Michael Malone there. He was a high upside international prospect, but it wasn't all bad news. It ended up coming out a few weeks ago that Malone did get 7-foot, 18-year-old Mali native Sayon Keita to commit to the Heels. He's a projected 2027 lottery pick. He's been characterized as having talent as a finisher, passer, offensive rebounder, shot blocker, and is a 7'5" wingspan. JJ, when this news originally came out a few weeks ago, what did you originally think?
I thought it was good. I'm glad we're getting some guys in the front court. That Vassar news was devastating, but we all knew that the NBA draft was the best option for him. And I think right now I'm really on the wave of grabbing these international players, trying to mold them to the youth, I guess the state's basketball kind of
new day and age of college basketball.
Like there's guys over there that have tremendous athleticism, tremendous size that can translate very well to the American way of basketball. And when you get a guy like Keita, I mean, he has a super, super high ceiling. I mean, he was playing in the FC Barcelona system at 18. So that's really solid. That's a really young age, and he's playing against high-level competition. But again, it's just really good that we got a good player from the international side, because it is tough trying to replace a guy like Vassar. It was definitely the biggest loss for us. But at the end of the day,
outside of Caleb. Outside of Caleb. But everyone expected Caleb to go to the draft. Obviously, it seemed like to be a 50-50 split on Vassar, and then more and more weeks ahead, it seemed like it was leaning towards staying in the draft. But I think Keita was a huge pickup. He was originally a 2027 recruit. He's going to reclassify and join the Heels next year. I think he's not the scorer Vassar essentially was for the Heels, but I think he'll definitely be a big target as a rim runner. and will definitely be able to disrupt shots as a defensive anchor, kind of up that defense that was potentially missing when Vasar or Caleb Wilson were hurt with injuries last year. Keita was named the defensive MVP at the NBPA Top 100 camp last year. And from the tape I've watched, he puts constant pressure on defenses. I think he'll likely be asked by Coach Malone to just dunk everything in sight, block everything in sight. I think there'll definitely be some growing pains early on through the transition from the international basketball with FC Barcelona to the college ball. But if Keita hits his ceiling, I think the growing pains will be worth it just because of his upside. I think it's off the charts.
No, absolutely. Like you just said, the upside for him is insane. And it's just, I'm really excited that we got a guy like him, man.
Yeah, super excited. There was another twist in the recruiting efforts as well for UNC and Mike Malone, with the Heels still on the hunt for more front court help, looking to reinforce kind of that big man depth. There was a lot of focus in recent weeks, and yet another European center who actually had a connection to one of the Tar Heel newcomers. He just committed and I think will make an immediate impact for UNC next year. His name is Alexandros Samodurov. That's a hard pronunciation.
Yeah, I was trying to look over that earlier.
Yeah, it's a 6'11", 212-pound Greek center who has already played in the EuroLeague, and there's multiple reports in the past few weeks, including one from inside Carolina who confirmed the commitment, had linked UNC to Alexandros early on as he was evaluating college options while also going through the NBA draft process. And Alexandros shares that Greek pipeline with the UNC commitment, Neoklis Avdalas. They both played for the EuroLeague in 2022 and 23. They also share the same agent. And there were a lot of notes about his tape coming out. I saw a FIBA scouting feature from his U18 days. He described him as a big forward who impressed with outstanding versatility on both ends of the court. Kind of similar to Keita. I think he's going to have highlight mobility, touch, the ability to play in multiple actions, whether it's being a stationary post piece or just being a scorer and rim runner. I think his commitment for Mike Malone, along with Sayon Keita, is going to be huge, especially for the backcourt next year, JJ.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably the most accomplished winner before taking even a game at UNC. I mean, he's done a lot over in Greece. I think of him more as he can be a small ball five, it being 6'11", or you can put him at the four and pair him up with Keita throughout the games. But another international player who is averaging over 17 points. He's playing professionally. He's been able to continue to hold himself to a high standard. And I think Coach Mike Malone is just getting started. In his first year, he's out there grabbing talent that a lot of people probably aren't looking at. And he's finding these pieces that can fit this offense at UNC. Like you said, that front court is probably the biggest question mark for me. After Vasar leaving and Caleb Wilson leaving. I know we have Jaren Stevenson still there and other guys in those spots, but I think continuing to build on that front court and having depth is one of the biggest things, because you can tell we got exploited a little bit last year whenever we had Vasar or Wilson or both out the game.
I think there was a lot of unknown about Michael Malone taking over the program, not with his coaching ability, but just making the transition from the professionals to college. Yep. And I think he answered a lot of those questions in this offseason so far with his ability to not only recruit from the high school ranks, but recruit in the transfer portal and overseas, especially with college basketball going more and more toward that international landscape. I think when we look at Alexandros, I think he'll be an excellent addition to the roster and could end up providing UNC with meaningful minutes across various positions, like you mentioned, the 3, the 4, the 5. I think he'll fit very well within the roster makeup as it stands. He's already 21, so he's definitely an older front court newcomer to go with a younger group that includes Maximo Adams, who's 18, Sayon Keita, who's 18, as well as one of the newcomers, center Cade Betterman, who we didn't mention before, from Northwestern. He's 19. So I think offensively, I think he'll definitely be able to insert himself as a lob threat, like I mentioned, with the ability to also knock down open jumpers. And with most of the focus being on the international prospect market, as we've mentioned, UNC was still exploring every possible option to improve next year's roster, with it being very different from last year, which included news that came out a week and a half ago. The Heels had landed four-star prospect from the class of 2026, 6'7" wing Kevin Thomas. He had previously committed to LSU and then declared his intention to play for UNC after their coaching change. I think that's definitely going to be a big pickup. He's a 6'7" forward out of Florida. He had reopened his recruitment following LSU's coaching change. And if you look at those 24/7 recruitment rankings, they have him around that 60 to 70 mark rank. And he had earned offers from Auburn, Florida State, Miami, Tennessee before ultimately committing to UNC. So I think that's another great pickup for the Tar Heels. And I think it shows that Malone's also going to be able to recruit some of these guys out of high school.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Thomas is an absolutely amazing athlete, like you just said. But like with the recruiting pitch, I know a lot of people were also kind of questioning, because in the NBA, you don't have to recruit anybody. These guys are professionals. They know what to do. And I think Mike Malone is just out here showing that he can still do this at this kind of college level. He can go out and recruit these kids. And if he can continue to do this, I really like how young this roster is, with a lot of these guys being 18, 17, 19 years old. And then you have some of the international guys, or guys like Jaron Stevenson, who have been in this, not in this system, but have been playing basketball for a while and are a little bit older, a little bit more mature. And so it's kind of really nice that you have
really good mix.
You got this young side of the roster and you got this older side of the roster who can really help each other out at the end of the day. But it is, like you said, picking up Thomas, I mean, taking him away from LSU, that's always good.
Yeah, that's always great.
Taking anybody away from another school, it's really awesome. But it's a lot of people just don't underestimate this. LSU is one hell of a basketball program, and he could have went there and he could have done great things. I'm clearly not going to be contributing probably as soon as he gets here, but I think a solid piece for him to be a practice kind of guy, or be a contributor in the next few years.
LSU has definitely been in the national conversation with them hiring Will Wade and stealing him from NC State. There's been a lot of conversation about them going after players who may or may not have eligibility. Kevin Thomas definitely will have eligibility coming in as a freshman, and it was great that Malone was able to flip him over to the Tar Heels. I think from the tape I've watched, he looks like a great developmental player that should be able to provide depth on the wing, with it potentially lacking after you see transfers like Luka Bogovac and Jonathan Powell leaving the program. I think he'll definitely increase that depth. I think he also has the potential to be a multi-year player for the Heels, assuming he accepts that role Malone has in mind for him. Going off of that, it seemed like Carolina's offseason was cemented last week when Matt Abel withdrew from the 2026 NBA draft and stated he'll officially play for head coach Michael Malone in Chapel Hill. I think, JJ, this was arguably the most important piece of the puzzle for UNC this offseason, which was retaining Matt Abel. He was a 6'6", 211 point guard, illustrated during the scouting combine in Chicago that he could definitely be an elite asset for the Heels next season. He was actually quoted last week right before leaving the combine. He said playing for a coach like Michael Malone for a blue blood program with UNC was really hard to pass up, and he's super excited to be at Tar Heel. When this news came out, JJ, that Abel would withdraw from the draft and come to UNC, what were you initially thinking?
I know, like, all UNC fans are really nervous. I mean, I don't know where he would have been at in the NBA draft. Maybe gets a chance, signs a two-way contract, but I think this is definitely a really good get. And anytime we can take something away from NC State, I am absolutely excited and happy for it. But again, I mean, he's probably going to be one of our better shooters on this roster. He's been proven that he can play in big-time games. And for him to have that mindset of wanting to play at UNC because it is a blue blood program, and I love how he's not thinking, oh, I'm coming here to get paid. I'm coming here to do this, that, and the third. He understands what UNC basketball is about, and he wants to play for a coach like Mike Malone. And again, like I said earlier, for Mike Malone to continue to be able to recruit well, he's got to have players want to go and play for him. And I mean, he has the experience. he has that notoriety. And
Mhm.
so if he can continue to do that and having guys come back, even though they want to go to the draft and want to stay at UNC, it's amazing. And, getting that news definitely solidified, I believe, the roster for this
Yep.
season.
Yep. Directly before Abel had withdrew from the draft, he was actually projected in ESPN's mock NBA draft to go around that 32, 33 range. So early second round. When people saw that, they were definitely knew it was probably going to be 50-50 whether or
Mhm.
not he would stay in the draft or return to Carolina. The fact that he made a decision to return to college and come to Carolina, I think is huge because you're seeing a guy who, if he had stayed in the draft, was going to go early second round and could potentially go early to late first round next year. I think Abel's ability to play off the ball and not be overly dependent on having the ball in his hands to generate points quickly. I believe it'll make him an elite glue guy in the
Yep.
offense. I actually saw some tape from his NBA combine scrimmages. He had finished second on the team in scoring with 15 points, going three for five from beyond the arc in that first combine scrimmage. And then in that second one from 2 weeks ago, he had led his team with 17 points, going 4 for 9 from three, while adding
Goodness,
four
he can
rebounds
shoot.
and an assist. And that was
Mhm.
in combine scrimmages with guys who are going to be getting drafted and going to the
Yep.
NBA next year. So that's super exciting and super noteworthy.
Yeah.
Also in the combine's mandatory shooting drills, Abel was 11th among all prospects in spot up shooting, going 17 for 25 from three, while finishing 25th in the 3-point star drill, knocking down 13 of 25 attempts. So you're definitely looking at a guy who will probably be one of, if not our best shooters and
Yep.
3-point knockdown marksman next year. I think there's no one's going to question Michael Malone's coaching pedigree,
Yep.
but if there was one aspect, like I mentioned before, of the coach's transition to the college ranks that many analysts and experts were unsure about, it was how he would adapt to the recruiting process. I think the
Yes.
longtime NBA head coach has passed that test with flying colors, JJ.
Yeah, I think because you think in the NBA, you have the GM, the presidents, they're making those decisions. As the head coach, you're kind of just managing the players. And for this position in college basketball, you are kind of the head guy. You want to build these relationships, and it's so crazy nowadays. You have guys that commit one day and next week, and then they're signing to a different place. And for a guy who has that pedigree of winning an NBA championship, you would think Mike Malone would just get kind of tired of that and want kids to come and just play for his program. But he's sticking it out. And like I said, for him to get Matt able to come back from the draft, I know he probably told him some stuff because he's been at that level.
For sure.
Yeah, so for him to come back
Yeah.
and be like, yeah, you can really make a lot of stuff shake for us next year. And like for Matt able to go out there and compete with those guys in the combine and put up numbers and be one of the better players, that just helps him out even more for this upcoming season.
Yeah, I think it's no question the fact that Abel saw the opportunity to play for a coach who had been in the NBA for
Yep.
20 to 25 years and a guy who's looking to get drafted next year and move from that second round to the first round. I think he saw it as a no-brainer. I think Malone's ability to construct an impressive transfer portal class, but also land one of the best overseas prospects and Sayon Keita, I think was definitely huge for this program. I think UNC's logo and historic
Yeah.
value alone will garner enough attention to attract marquee players year in and year out. But having a coach in place that instills confidence
Yeah.
and a sustainable vision for a player's development like Matt Abel,
Yeah.
I believe it's a monumental factor in getting over the finish line in pursuit of specific prospects, JJ.
Absolutely, man. And just it's crazy how he just continues to really impress me. Because I was a little shocked on not shocked, but kind of nervous on his recruiting pitches and how he was gonna be able to handle it. And I think he's been able to handle it with flying colors.
I completely agree. As we look toward next season, obviously, we won't see this team fully in action until October. So we still do have a few months from now. But if we start to look at what this starting lineup and depth bench might look like, you look at Utah transfer Terrence Brown running the point, who a lot of people think could potentially lead this team in scoring
Yeah.
after averaging just under 20 points last year in the Big 12. You now look at Matt Abel returning to college basketball and coming to UNC. You look at a guy like Nicholas Avdalas, the transfer from Virginia Tech, who could potentially start at the 3. For watching his tape, he reminds me a lot of an international Cormac Ryan, the way he could
Yes.
potentially end up spacing the
Yes.
floor next
Mhm.
year. I think he'll be a huge piece for the Heels. And then potentially at that starting 4 or 5 spot, I think Jaron Stevenson will be a
Yep.
huge return asset at that 4 spot. And then at the center spot, I think you're potentially looking at Sayon Keita or
Keita.
Alexandros from Greece. So I think either one of those guys will be able to start the 5, and then you'll have a known prospect and known asset and piece in Alexandros coming off the bench to back up either Stevenson or Keita. And looking down the line, down the bench, look at someone like Maximo Adams, 5-star, who would definitely be able to provide some depth at the wing. You return Jaden Young, you return Isaiah Dennis, and you still have Kevin Thomas, who we mentioned before,
Mhm.
flipping from LSU. I think when you start looking through it, JJ, you're looking at around a 9-10 man rotation.
Yeah, I think that's what we needed. We didn't really have that depth. I really didn't believe we did this past season.
Hmm.
But we have guys on this roster who are proven scorers, who are proven defenders, and proven playmakers. That starting 5, I think that looks beautiful right there. You
Yeah.
have Terrence Brown in there, who, like you say, probably going to lead this team in points and lead it in scoring
Yep.
and kind of be that offensive threat, offensive leader that we need.
Almost
But
RJ Davis like a
oh
little
yeah,
bit.
absolutely. Well, a little bit.
A
RJ was
little bit. Yeah.
RJ was
Yeah.
crazy.
RJ was something of his own, but
Yeah.
I think Terrence Brown will be as close to what
Mhm.
RJ was as possible.
That's what we needed. We needed somebody on that offense to really be that spark. And, when there's games where it's close and we need to go get a bucket, we know who the ball's going to. And I mean, last
Hmm.
year it was kind of bucket getter by community, it seemed like.
Right, right. The
And
guard play was definitely iffy to say the
yeah.
least last year, and I
Hmm.
think there's a lot more known with what the guard play and backcourt will look like next year.
Yep.
And like I mentioned before, I think the first thing that comes off the page, especially when you look at this starting lineup, is the size. You look at
Yes.
someone like Avdalas with length, size, Jared Stevenson, length, size, Sayon Keita, 7 foot, length, size. And even those guys down the bench, Alexandros, Maximo, everyone thinks Isaiah Dennis will end up taking a step this year. It's a lot
Yes.
of length and a lot of size that pops off the page immediately. And
Hmm.
you look at teams who have won championships in prior years in college basketball. You look at a
They've
team
been
like
long.
they've been long, lengthy, and
Hmm.
size, especially with Michigan winning it this past year. Looking at UConn, who had won it in back-to-back years, they were known to have size down low and across their lineup. So I think in this day and age of college basketball, having size is a no-brainer and a no question.
Yeah, I think this is what we needed. We have a bunch of size, and even in the starting lineup, Avdalas, he's got size. Terrence Brown, he's got size.
Mhm.
These guards really aren't built like the guards that we had last year. I mean, we had guards like Seth Trimble who were kind of on the shorter side, 6'2",
Mhm.
6'3". We've got guys that are 6'6", 6'7", being able to handle the
Yep.
ball and bring it down the court, and that's what we need. And they're proven scorers, and that's what I'm most excited about. That I don't think there's anybody on in that starting lineup or really in that first 3-man rotation that aren't scared to go make a play and go get a bucket. I know it is a little tough though because you go to UNC and those expectations are high, and we saw that last year with guys
Sure.
like Kyan Evans and
Mhm.
um, having those expectations, thinking that he played well at this spot, but he's going to be even better at UNC because it's UNC. So I
Right.
will say that it's kind of that note for fans. Just understand it is a little bit harder to transition. There's a lot more pressure, but this is the most confident I've been in the transfer portal. I mean, it is absolutely a whole new team, and
Yep.
we don't know what it's going to be like, what those teams, what those players are going to mesh well, and what Mike Malone puts out there on the floor.
I completely agree. All we know is the tape that we've seen from all of these guys at their respective schools and international programs,
Mhm.
but on paper, it looks super promising.
Yes.
JJ, as we wrap things up here and we start to look toward next season, I've been looking at a few off-season projections for college teams now that most, if not all, of the rosters across the country are basically set after the NBA draft withdrawal deadline. A lot of analysts have been placing UNC in that 23, 24, 25 range in
Yeah.
the top 25. When you hear that, And knowing what you've seen from tape, what are your current expectations going into next year?
I'm that 20 that rank is expected for me.
Hmm.
UNC is a blue blood, so it kind of holds that weight in the national media. So they are always going to give. I think they'll always give us a slight bump. Um, but this is one of those years where we really don't have expectations because we don't
Right,
know what we have. And
right.
that's probably one of the best things about having like a first year coach or like a first year rebuild of a program. There's no high expectations, there's no low expectations. You can only just go off of what they do.
Mhm.
And in the past, when we've had those high expectations, we really haven't been able to overcome the adversity and reach those expectations. Versus
Yeah,
you have that national championship run that we almost won, and back in what 2021,
yep,
2022,
yep,
that nobody was expecting us to go all the way
yeah.
that year, and they ended up just playing basketball freely because they could just go out there, think about the media, and then you head into next year. We're the number one team in the country, and then you saw it all crumble down. But I think Mike Malone's not gonna let us crumble like that. He is a
Yeah.
legit basketball coach, so it
I
should
can
be really really fun.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you look at the program since making it to the Sweet 16 3 years ago, the past two seasons, the team barely snuck into the tournament 2 years ago and then lost in the first round. And then this past year, obviously high expectations with how good the team looked when they were fully healthy. But with the Caleb Wilson injury, the team makes it in as a 6 seed and then again loses in the first round. So
Yeah.
back-to-back years of not making out of the first round in the March Madness tournament. I think when you look up and down this roster, I don't think there is necessarily a ceiling on this team. I
Yeah.
think the floor you could potentially look at, I think making the tournament is a no-brainer, no question. But I think this is a team that could definitely make a Sweet 16 Elite 8 run just based off the tape I've watched.
Yes. Yes.
Obviously, there's still a lot of questions. We don't
Hmm.
know how the team is going to mesh together. There's definitely going to be some growing pains with that chemistry since a lot of the guys haven't played with each other, with guys coming from the international ranks, coming from overseas, guys coming from different programs across the country. I think there's going to be some growing pains early on, but I don't see why this team can't be a Sweet 16, Elite 8, and potentially even Final Four team when we get down to it in March.
Yeah, because like you just said, when these are all new guys playing with each other for the first time, and as an athlete, I honestly think this is the best bet that we can have because it brings in competition. I
Right.
know whenever back when Tez Walker transferred to UNC when I was playing football, I know he was there to be the number one guy to take spots. So that made me play better. And
Yeah.
so you're going to have a bunch of guys with all first impressions, and how your
Mhm.
first impression goes a long way. So they're going to put their best foot forward. And I think that's really going to be the catalyst is just continual competition and trying to show that they belong there. Because in this day and age, if you don't produce, we'll get rid of you and go get somebody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
And that's clearly kind of been the message with this new portal. Like they've
Yep.
got rid of guys, they've lost guys. They're like, okay, it happens. We're going to go grab somebody else that could be better than you or even is a better fit than you.
I completely agree. That competition, we've already been seeing that a little bit from the UNC basketball social accounts. They were
Mhm.
teasing Avdalas going up against Jaron Stevenson in a bit of scrimmage battles in play. So we're already going to be seeing that a bit. And I think the program's going to keep teasing what this team could potentially look like next October. That's going to do it for the 15th episode of Chapel Thrill Pod. Me and JJ will be back to provide our thoughts and opinions on how the offseason for Carolina is continuing to progress. We'll also potentially take a look at the NBA draft when it comes next June, or I guess this June and
Yep.
later this month, and analyze where Caleb Wilson and Henry Vasar end up landing professionally. Caleb Wilson, he's been pretty busy over the
Yeah.
past week. I've been seeing a lot of great content. He's currently in San Antonio working as an NBA correspondent, doing coverage for the finals. So I just saw him earlier today on NBA Today. He's been doing a lot of interviews during media week with the teams in the NBA. So Caleb looks like he's doing great
Mhm.
currently, even before the draft this later month,
I
JJ.
even I even saw on one of my social media pages like there was kind of a mix in terms of the projected draft, and some
Yep.
some of them had Caleb Wilson going second, right behind AJ DeBanza from BYU. And
I saw
I
that.
think that's super valid. You have a guy with that length and that athleticism. You really can't pass on that. And got to shout out both the Harrisons for the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA Finals. You know, they play tonight, and both great UNC basketball players. And it's just crazy.
I remember
they're both named Harrison. So.
Yeah. Harrison Barnes. The memory starts to get a little vague, but I was at school with Harrison Ingram, and he was definitely a spectacle to watch. So definitely pulling for him there with the Spurs. If I had to make an NBA Finals prediction, I think my New York roots would tell me to take Knicks in 7. I don't know which way you're going, JJ, but either way, you have the Spurs jersey there, so I think I know what your pick will be.
We got Wemby and the Spurs in 7.
Yep.
But I would love to see New York with it in the final. I think that would be amazing.
I think the people have been saying the city will potentially burn down, that they're going to have to bring in the National Guard. So growing up in New York, I'm super excited to see what ends up happening. I think it'll be a great series. And also, before we wrap things up here, I want to touch on and shout out UNC baseball. We'll be playing in the Super Regionals this weekend in Boschmer Stadium with a chance to get back to Omaha. JJ, this is the best I've potentially seen the Carolina baseball team since I was a student my freshman year. I think they have a chance to win the program's first championship ever. They've been to the College World Series twice and lost in the championship twice, and I think they have a better shot than ever to potentially claim the program's first ever championship.
Yeah, like you just said, this is the best team I've seen since we had Vance Honeycutt out there in the outfield making top 10 plays every week. Gavin Gallagher, gotta shout him out with wearing number 5. He's been an absolute beast at the plate. I know they got a lot of young pitchers that are just dealing.
Jason DeCaro, Ryan Lynch, Caden Glauber, and I'm a big fan of Walker McDuffie. Superman Clark Kent with the glasses. So I know all the Tar Heel fans will be tuned in to Super Regionals this weekend, and we'll be waiting on updates as the Carolina basketball program offseason progresses. For JJ Jones, I'm Hunter Caparelli. As always, go Heels.
Go Heels.